Today is September 21st. It's the 265th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. On this day in 1780, General Benedict Arnold commits the act that makes his name synonymous with the act of treason. He gives the British the plans to the fort at West Point. Before he turns coat and becomes America's most infamous disgruntled employee, Benedict Arnold is one of George Washington's most trusted generals. Arnold is a war hero, a brave leader who has the full faith and support of General Washington. However, Arnold has been frustrated for a couple of years now. He's pessimistic about the future amidst a depreciating currency and disaffected by infighting within Congress. Arnold has distinguished himself on the battlefield and sustained leg injuries so severe that he's sidelined from further combat. Yet despite all of his successes and sacrifices for the Patriot cause, Arnold is passed over for promotion by the Continental Congress. And not to mention that he has recently married for the second time, and his wife has expensive tastes that have left Arnold heavily in debt. Though physically unfit for battle, Washington appoints Arnold as military commander of Philadelphia after the British evacuate in 1778. The Patriots in Philly don't like Arnold. They think he's a little too friendly with the Loyalists. They also accuse him of corruption. In light of these accusations, Arnold is court-martialed. Though found innocent, he becomes bitter over this treatment, and he resigns his post in March of 1779. By May, he secretly approaches the British, selling his services as a spy. On this day in 1780, British spymaster Major John Andre disembarks the British sloop Vulture for a secret nighttime meeting with Arnold. After months of negotiation, the British have agreed to meet Arnold's request, payment of £20,000 and the rank of Brigadier General. In exchange, Arnold will surrender West Point to them, the strategic fort high above the Hudson River in New York. An unknowing George Washington gives Arnold command of the fortifications at West Point. This is a crucial tactic in Arnold's overall plot to turn the tide of the war in favor of the British. West Point strategically overlooks the Hudson River. British control of this fort will allow them to divide the colonies, isolating and eventually choking off the rebellion. Once in command of this fort, Arnold pulls together important intelligence for the British, giving the documents to Major Andre when they meet under cover of this night in 1780. These are the same documents that, ironically, George Washington will read days later while waiting for Arnold in his own residence as the traitor escapes. They include a map of West Point and Washington's own War Council minutes from a couple weeks prior. Washington orders the arrest of Arnold, but it's too late. He's already made it safely behind British lines. Arnold's spymaster, Major Andre, doesn't fare as well. After parting ways with Arnold on this night in 1780, Andre, with Arnold's documents hidden in his boot and disguised in Patriot clothing, is stopped in what he thinks is British territory by 3 low-level Loyalist militiamen. Upon identifying himself as a British officer and demanding passage, the supposed Loyalist militia reveal themselves to be Patriots in disguise. They apprehend Andre, taking him to the nearest military post. Thinking their commanding officer, General Arnold, will need to know about this capture and the evidence, the confiscated documents that originated with Arnold are sent back to him via messenger. Upon their arrival, Arnold realizes the jig is up. In his haste to say goodbye to his wife and flee to safety, he leaves the incriminating evidence behind. The incriminating evidence Washington discovers when he arrives a mere hour later for a prearranged meeting, which incidentally was intended to be a trap for Washington. George Washington makes an offer to the British, André, in exchange for Arnold. But the Brits worry that this will prevent future turncoats from deserting to the British side. So they refuse and keep Arnold, making him a brigadier general as promised. Major André meets his maker at the end of a noose. Benedict Arnold, whose act of treason on this day in 1780 establishes his legacy, his name being forever synonymous with the words traitor and betrayal, is not trusted in the least by his new British commanders. His military career fizzles. He returns to his old life as a merchant after the war and dies 11 years later in London. On this day in 1976, Chilean economist Orlando Letelier is assassinated on the streets of Washington, D.C., killed by a car bomb as he drives to work in the middle of D.C.'s Sheridan Circle. Orlando Letelier is a former Chilean ambassador to the U.S. under Chilean President Salvador Allende. After the military coup led by General Augusto Pinochet, Letelier lives in the U.S. in exile, denouncing the Pinochet regime in writings and speeches. Letelier also takes a position at the Institute for Policy Studies, a Washington think tank that focuses on international policy. On this day in 1976, Letelier gives one of his colleagues, 25-year-old Ronnie Moffett, a ride to work. Her husband, Michael Moffett, joins them. His car is in the shop, and he's going to borrow Letelier's car for the day. 5 minutes after leaving his home in Bethesda, Maryland with the Moffetts, Letelier drives into D.C. It's at this point that 2 Cuban exiles in a gray sedan begin following him. As he drives down Massachusetts Avenue towards the Institute's office on DuPont Circle, he first comes to a roundabout at Sheridan Circle in northwest Washington, D.C., right in the middle of Embassy Row. At 9:35 a.m., Letelier pulls his Chevrolet Chevelle around Sheridan Circle. As he passes in front of the Irish and the Romanian embassies, the Cubans, following behind, detonate the bomb. In that instant, Michael Moffett recalls hearing a buzzing noise and then seeing a flash. The bomb taped underneath Letelier's driver's seat is a simple device, some C4 mounted on top of toothpicks, inside a cake tin. The bomb explodes to devastating effect. The car is lifted in the air and drops, colliding with a yellow VW Beetle parked illegally in front of the Irish embassy. Orlando Letelier is severely injured. He's pinned under the car. He dies within minutes of the explosion on this day in 1976. His colleague Ronnie Moffett passes away an hour later at the hospital. Her husband Michael dives out of a rear passenger window and survives the explosion. Debris from the blast lands on the embassy roofs, which are technically foreign soil, making the collection of evidence a diplomatic challenge. But when the evidence is gathered, it leads to the conspiracy of the Cuban exiles, 5 in all, who are hired for the hit by an American named Michael Townley, who builds the cake tin bomb for the Cubans to plant. Townley, born in Waterloo, Iowa, is an operative of the Chilean secret police with ties to the CIA, who at the time works as a hitman and weapons manufacturer for General Pinochet. After his conviction for Orlando Letelier's murder on this day in 1976, he turns witness for the prosecution when the Cuban conspirators go to trial. Townley currently resides in the Witness Protection Program. In his trial, Townley testifies that General Pinochet ordered and planned the murder of Orlando Letelier, and in response, nothing is done. Because in 1976, General Pinochet is a U.S. ally. The assassination by car bomb of Chilean diplomat Orlando Letelier on the streets of Washington, D.C. on this day in 1976 is handled strictly as a criminal case. This unprecedented act of state-sponsored terror on U.S. soil is otherwise left unanswered. There are 101 days left in the year. On This Day is produced by me, Dave Schultz. Thank you very much for listening. Today's episode written by me and Elizabeth Schultz. Born on this day in 1947, best-selling author Stephen King. In 1950, the funniest man in show business, Bill Murray. And in 1967, the greatest drummer ever to rock out of the Great White North, Tyler Stewart of Bare Naked Ladies. So if you're still listening,
6 to 4,